Welcome back. Today we're going to do propagation of plants from cuttings. So this way you buy one plant and you'll never have to buy another one again, as long as you take the time to take care of it and to continue propagating. So today we're going to propagate 3 plants. We're going to do this Mexican sunflower, and we're also going to do a passion fruit vine, and we're going to do another great plant that's called sweet almond bush, and the botanical name is Aloysia virgata. Wonderful plant, pretty easy to propagate from cuttings, and not only that, but the fragrance is unbelievable. It's also a great plant because it attracts bees like mad. I mean, you'll bring bees. If you're afraid of bees, don't propagate or don't buy one of these. But if you want bees in your yard, this is the plant you want to get, Aloysia virgata. Now here's the possum purple. I planted this in the container, and I did that just about, I think it was about 2 weeks ago I put it in there, and it was probably half that size, and it's growing like crazy. And the idea is it's going to take over that fence, and once it takes over that fence, it'll start to flower, and then before you know it, I'll have some beautiful passion fruit. And then that's another one that I'm going to show you how to propagate. We're going to get started with the sweet almond bush and show you how we do a brand new clone or cutting of this plant. You can see the flowers, really pretty, beautiful. This has been in the pot for a little while. Haven't really pruned it much, haven't done much with it, but it can be pruned to a central leader, and you can have a very pretty little tree if you want. But we let this one grow into more of a bush. Now, these flowers, the fragrance is unbelievable. It's incredibly strong. I can't even describe it. A fragrance that's very much similar to like a honeysuckle, or some people describe it as a jasmine. I can't even describe it. You have to just smell this. It has such a sweet, amazing fragrance. So if you want to do a cutting of this, what I usually do is I'll go down and I'll take some semi hardwood, a little green and a little brown or gray in this case, and I'll come down to a node, just below a node, and I'll take a little cutting like that, see? And then I'm going to strip all these leaves off. All the leaves got to come off, at least to about this area right here, right? You take them down there, and then what you do is you cut off the flowers. You don't need the flowers, and it's afternoon, so this really typically should be done early in the morning. Okay, now you don't want to take off all of the leaves, but you do want to take off all of the flowers. So we knock off all the flowers. And they tell you that when you're propagating that you should not propagate when the plant is actually flowering. And I've noticed that there's really not that much of a difference. The minute you remove the flowers and you stress the plant by doing this, which is cutting a couple of the leaves, all right? So in this case, I left just 3 leaves. And I'm usually going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, right? So we're going to go, this time we're going to go 4. So we'll go 4 nodes, and we're going to cut a little bit of an angle, okay? Just a little angle, okay? And then I'm going to go show you what I use to root these in and what I use to stimulate the actual rooting. Then I'm going to show you a couple of plants that are in containers that have already rooted. Then you'll see some passion fruit, and then you'll see some of the Mexican sunflowers, and those you'll see some already growing, and you'll see other ones that are the passion fruit that already have roots. So you can see that this really does work, okay? And I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. I'm in the area where I'm underneath the shade, and I have my propagation domes. I'll get into a little more detail about these propagation domes. I'll get a little close up for you so you can see what these domes are and how they work. But right now, I'm going to show you 2 important things. First of all, I still have my little cutting right over here, and I have 2 choices here. I have, you could use whatever rooting powder you want to use. I tend to use Hormex. Sometimes I use other brands. This is a Hormex 8, and this is a Hormex 16. The 16 is for really difficult to root cuttings, like, for example, macadamia. I would use something like this. Most of the time, everything works well with the 8, and these guys work well with 8, so we're going to use 8. So the way to do this is, the way I do it anyway, and I only need a little bit, right? So I'm just going to drop a tiny little, bit, and it's more than I need. And I just put it in into this little cap, right? So I'll just drop it into the cap, and it's a little bit like clumping. So I'll just break it up a little bit. And then this here, normally you would take this and dip this in some water, which I do have over here. Let me get it. So I have my water. We'll keep that cutting in the water. And then I'm going to show you, after the cutting sat in the water for a minute or so, you want to take the cutting. Obviously that wasn't a minute, but this is demonstration, okay? So I just scrape the side a little bit, not much, just a little tiny scrape on the side, dip it in the water. Then I'm going to look at what I'm going to use to root with. So I like to use these guys. These are called root riots, and they work really well, but they don't work for everything. You have to kind of know what they work with. If you want to root most things, it's going to work. But if you wanted to root something like a fig, which has a nice thick stem, it'll root, but I found that they'll root out, and then later on, after you've transplanted them, they don't do so well. So I've stopped doing the root cubes, and what I'll use is I'll just use a little container with some perlite, and that works just as good, actually better. So, you know, sometimes one thing works great, but it doesn't work for something else. So now that's been in the water for a little bit. I've already scraped it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just dip it. Let me show you guys, because I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to dip it in a little bit of the powder, get the powder on there, okay? And it's got, I don't know if you can see the powder, it's got the powder on there. Now what you don't want to do is, these come with a little hole. You don't want to just stick it in there right away. So what you want to do is you want to first make sure you open that up a little bit, okay? Because that way, when you place the cutting with the rooting powder in there, you don't tend to lose all of it. And then when you push down, you're going to push down at least to 2 nodes, right? So 2 nodes deep. So go down at least two nodes deep. On some plants, it'll be only 1 node, but sometimes if you look at the plant, the space, you know, they're much closer, and you'll get 2-3 nodes inside. So that guy's ready to go. And simply, the next step, I'll show you where I put him into the propagation chamber. All right, so this is the propagation, I call it my propagation chamber. This is a plastic container with 3 levels, a hard plastic tray on the bottom, and you can see there's several cuttings in there, and there's different types of cuttings. And the sweet almond bush will go in there, and there's water in the bottom, and then what I'll do is I'll spray it with some mist, and then I'll cover it up, and it's usually good for the whole day. Then the next day in the afternoon, I'll come back and check it, make sure there's actual humidity on the lid, on the inside of the lid, which there is, and that's usually enough to keep everybody happy. It's never 100%, but you get pretty good rates of propagation depending on the plants. So you're gonna get probably a good 80 to 90% in most cases. So this is a sweet almond bush, and we just drop him in there. That's it, that's it. He's gonna be in there. Later on, I'll spray this with some water just to make sure he gets a little bit of mist on the surface, keep his leaves from being, you know, completely dry. So keep a little bit of moisture on their leaves. Now, sometimes people will ask, why do you have to cut the leaves? The reason that you cut the leaves is it minimizes the amount of leaves that are on the plant, and it also allows the plant to pick up some sunlight to help produce those roots. But in addition to that, you know, it avoids the loss of moisture, okay, transpiration. So you do that for those reasons, but then also you do that because that stimulates hormones. So that little injury stimulates growth, and that should be in the form of roots being developed. Now, that's that. I do have one in the back that is beginning to leaf out, but it hasn't rooted. I checked it this morning. I'm not sure if you could see the one I'm pointing to here, but this guy, I'm not pulling it out, but believe me, in a week and a half to 2 weeks, it's completely rooted in that cube. And to give you an example, I'll show you what a passion fruit looks like when it's rooted and ready to be transplanted, and then I'll show you how I actually propagate the passion fruit. You probably can figure it out just by looking at these cubes. And I always use this to pick them up. Look at the roots on there, right? Roots look pretty good, pretty nice. All right, now you can see what I have there. It's a beautiful plant, and that's a possum purple passion fruit that is it's ready to be planted. You can put that in a container, and in less than a month and a half, you'll have a plant that's already grown really nice. It'll probably take a full 2.5 months to get into a 3-gallon on a trellis completely grown, and probably another couple of months after that, depending on the season, for your plant to be flowering. So there you go. That's how we do it. So I'll show you how I got to this stage here in just a second. And again, we use the rooting cubes, and then you have a couple of choices. There's many of these in the market, but the Root Riots are the ones that I'm very familiar with and they work really well. They're the ones that come with a little hole in the top. But sometimes, if you saw this guy, what I did is I actually slice this because it makes it easier, okay, than sticking it in there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take this one, and I'm gonna, usually scissors is better, so I don't have scissors handy. What you do is be real careful you don't cut yourself, and then you're gonna slice this like this to create that opening, okay? So keep that in mind, all right? Now, while I keep this over here, I'm gonna show you something else. There's another brand of these. I don't remember the name. They're similar, but they're not exactly the same. They don't have a hole. They have that slit right there. And I guess that's okay. But I haven't tried these. I would probably do the same thing and slide, cut this down along the side. I would do this with this when I'm ready to use these. I would do that. It just makes it easier for certain types of plants to do it that way. All right, and then these have to be soaked. All these guys have to be soaked in some water, in a little tiny bucket of water. Let them soak for a good hour, and then they're very well hydrated at that point. All right, so that is what's happening with these guys. Let me show you another one. I believe there should be another one that's ready in here. Let's take a look. Okay, so there you go. I think you can see that one's got roots, and it's doing real nice, and it's ready to be stepped up. We'll keep him in the water for now. Now, speaking of water, this can actually be rooted in water. Well, a lot of people are probably saying that right now. Oh, you know what? I could root those in water. Yeah, you can, but guess what? When you root them in water, it's been my experience and the experience of a lot of people that I've known over the years. Yeah, they'll root. You'll get 10 to root, and you'll get one that'll actually grow well in the soil. And the reason for that oftentimes is that once they go from water to soil, those roots are kind of weak. They're not so strong, and they're not really used to it. So a lot of times they fail. So I would recommend avoid rooting them in water, okay? If you want to and you have success, then do what you got to do if it works for you. But this method works really well. And I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to point out a lot of people will propagate these by using 2 nodes, and they'll stick it actually in the pot with the entire, I got to show you. Let me show you. All right, there's gonna be a lot of shadows here. I apologize because we're right in the sunlight now, and not much I can do about that. But I'm gonna show you how some other people do this, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. So some people will take a vine like this, and they, it's always a good idea to avoid the delicate tip, because this usually doesn't work out too good, right? So you don't want to try to root that, but you do want to try to root something that can be done, and it's often done, is people will take off this bottom leaf, all right? And then if you look here, I don't know if you can see it, but right there is where the node is. There's a tiny little bit of growth right there. There's another node with a leaf, and there's a tiny little growth right there, and it continues all the way up, right? It continues all the way up. Now, what some people will do is they'll take something like this, and they'll avoid damaging that little growth that's coming from there, okay? Yeah, of course, you want to make sure you don't damage that. And then what they'll do is they'll take the leaf, which is what I do, and I'll cut the leaf, and I'll cut one, about, I just lost my bandage. Let's get that bandage out of here. All right, so you got 1, 2, right? So they'll do this, and then they'll take this and they'll root this in water by dipping this in water, or other times what they'll do is they'll go ahead and put the rooting powder and whatnot, and then they'll put this into a little perlite or a little bit of vermiculite or something, and that'll work. That'll work. That's not a problem. But you want to make a lot of plants, you can do it a different way and take advantage of every one of these as individual plants. I'm going to show you how that works. So what I was saying is you could take these and you could go ahead and just this whole thing, dip it into the rooting hormone, and then go ahead and put it into a little bit of a mix, you know, very light vermiculite or some other perlite or something like that, and then you'll be able to get a nice plant with, you know, 1, 2, 3 nodes. So you have a nice plant quickly, and you can do that. And I've done that. But if you want to take advantage, because maybe you don't have a lot of growth on the plant and you want to make multiple ones quickly, because you need individual ones, right? You can do this, right? You'll come up to it and you'll cut. Remember, don't damage the little growth that you'll see right above that leaf, right? So you could do this way, right? You could take a little cut like this, make one, eliminate all this, but no, don't damage that guy, right? Take him out. And now I have 2. So instead of making one plant, even though these are going to be smaller, instead of making one plant with one stem, you can make multiple plants. So if you only had 12 of those and you had to divide them up into 6 pieces, you've got 6 plants. But if you took all 12 individually like this, you just made 12 plants. So that's what I recommend. Also, your success rate, I've noticed, is a little bit higher when you divide it up that way. Okay? So for example, you might get 10 out of 12, as opposed to you might have only gotten, if you did 6, you might have only got, you know, 4 or 3. So either way, whichever way you want to do it, but I'm here to show you how I do it, okay? And then what I do is, I go ahead and I took that and I sliced it. You can see how I sliced it before. I cut it right down the middle. And then I'll just take this little thing here. I'll make sure, actually I get it wet. And then after it's wet for a few minutes, maybe a minute or 2, I'll go ahead and I'll make sure I got the rooting hormone on there. Get it on both ends, right? Get it on that end over here and get it on that end over there. And then just do this. Just take it and just place it in there. And then you can forget about it. Now what I sometimes do is, if I have available rubber bands, I'll put a little rubber band around it. And then from here, it goes right into the propagation chamber. All right, so here we are back at the chamber, the propagation chamber, and we're just gonna put them in there. And you'll notice that that one was very tiny, and sometimes I'll make the leaves a lot larger. It doesn't really matter. You could do it small like that, or you could do it a little larger. And the reason is those plants and those leaves were a lot bigger. And I could do the same thing with the other guy. You know, I'm gonna put that hormone on there. Again, notice that it goes right on the tips of the cut. Get the hormone powder in there. Okay, got a little bit. And again, this should have been soaked in water for a minute or 2. And now we're gonna use these new cubes, and we'll put that in there this way. And see, that's kind of cool because it's slid at the top, and it's actually easier to put it in there. Now this cube is not as wet as it should be because it didn't hydrate long enough, but I'm gonna worry about that later. I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in there, okay? Now, 2 weeks from now, that'll be fully rooted, maybe even less. Sometimes it'll only take a week, believe it or not. So look how beautiful that looks, right? So that's ready to be planted in a pot. And I'm gonna show you one that's about 2.5 months old. I'll show you. All right, so now you're looking at 2 that are about 2.5 months from cuttings, and these are different. These are not the possum purple. These are the Panama red, and this is a very similar, but they're a little larger fruit. They're supposed to be sweet, but a little bit more tart, and you know, pretty much the color of the fruit is like has a bit of a reddish tinge to it, you know. So it's a beautiful fruit. It's very, very popular. So this one's called Panama red, and you can see what it looks like after just a couple of months from a cutting. That's what you've got. So yeah, so now I'm going to show you some other ones that are possum purple that are small that have just been stepped up into containers. All right, so these are the possum purple, and these are beginning to root really nicely in the containers. These are at about the 2.5-week stage, so there's not much activity here on the surface, but if you look at the bottom, see the roots? It's putting all this energy into roots right now. Let me show you the other one. See the roots? And I'll show you the last one. Well, there's 2 more, but I'll show you this one. You see the roots are coming out? So all the energy is now below the ground, pushing roots. I haven't fertilized this. There's no need to fertilize this at all. Just leave these alone, let them do their thing. And once you start to see 3 or 4 leaves of new growth, you could go ahead and give it a very light fertilizer, a very light 20-20-20 if you like, or other organic fertilizer that you prefer. Now there is a couple of other plants I told you that we were going to do. I told you we were doing the sweet almond bush, and I told you we did the Mexican sunflower. So the sweet almond bush, you already saw how I did that. And the possum purple passion fruit is exactly the same way I showed you how to do that, is exactly the same way that you do the Mexican sunflower. The good news is that the Mexican sunflower grows so fast, it's scary. You can get the roots in less than a week in many cases. And let me show you what those plants look like, and they're only 2 weeks old. All right, this is your Mexican sunflower from cuttings. This is 2 weeks total growth from the time it started rooting to the time it went into the pot, and look what we've got. Less than a week to root and about a week and a half now in the pot, and look at the growth. It's beautiful, isn't it? So we have 3 of them in there. 1, 2, 3, and those are the Mexican sunflower. Now let me show you what the sweet almond bush looks like after it's been potted up. And these are about 3 weeks. If I'm not mistaken, these are about 3 weeks. Let's take a look at this one. Back here, let's look at the bottom. You don't really see any roots, but it's doing fine. This is rooted well in there, and you can see we've got nice new growth. Okay, let me see if I can find one that actually has a little bit more action on the rooting. Let's see if we can show you. There's another one, right? That's a sweet almond bush. Let me see. I can see a little bit of roots on the bottom. Okay, let me see if I can find another one. We'll keep looking and try to show you guys. Yep, here we go. We got just a tiny little hair there with the roots, and you can see it's doing beautiful. So these are sweet almond bush, Aloysia virgata, Mexican sunflower, and possum purple passion fruit. And you know what? There's hundreds of plants that you can propagate the same way. And then some of them are a little more finicky because you have to do them a certain time of year. For example, this is an heirloom rose. It's been around probably 30 years. I've known this rose. It was given to me by a nice lady in Coral Gables. And this is easy to propagate as well from cuttings. You do want to do it during the cooler months of the year. And you can get these beautiful plants like this. So you know what? You can go and buy plants. And once you bought the plant, take care of it and make more plants. Because you know what? It's rewarding. It saves you money. You're going to develop a thumb that'll be so green, it's going to be scary.